Ashley lived alone in a small apartment on the 6th floor of a quiet building in the heart of the city. The place was modest but cozy, with light-colored walls, plants scattered across the windowsills, and a pale blue armchair she had restored herself. The kitchen was small yet meticulously organized, just like almost everything in her life. Every day she woke up at exactly 6:30 a.m., no alarm needed. It was a routine, a habit shaped over the years. First, she would stretch slowly in bed, her eyes still half closed, then open the window to feel the fresh morning air and watch the sky, a quiet ritual that helped her start the day. Next, she'd put the kettle on the stove and prepare her coffee with milk, while toasting 2 slices of bread and spreading butter with almost mathematical precision. Ashley was methodical, one of her greatest strengths, but sometimes an invisible prison as well. She kept notebooks filled with to-do lists, loved spreadsheets, and wrote everything down, from movies she watched to dreams she remembered. Her organization impressed her co-workers, but hid a subtle insecurity, that feeling that if she ever stepped off track, she might not know how to find her way back. She was kind and helpful with a quiet, attentive heart, always willing to listen, though rarely fully opening up. She wasn't one for grand gestures, but she felt deeply. She kept her feelings like old letters, carefully, afraid of creasing them too much. On the other hand, she could be stubborn. She took time to accept change and resisted the unexpected. Asking for help was hard. She believed she had to handle everything on her own. Sometimes this perfectionism wore her down, but she never said a word. She just sighed quietly and kept moving forward with her elegant posture and determined step, as if the world always knew exactly where she was going. Ashley worked as a secretary in a well-respected law office located in the heart of the city. The building looked old on the outside, with grand columns and heavy wooden doors, but inside it hid modern, quiet rooms, cold as marble, almost as silent as Ashley herself. Her desk was right by the entrance to the administrative area, always impeccably tidy, with pens neatly lined up, a small, succulent plant, and a photo frame holding an old picture of her parents, taken at a picnic she still remembered fondly. Her routine was punctual, precise, and often repetitive. Ashley always arrived 15 minutes early, calmly took off her coat, sipped coffee from the reception's thermos, and sat down in front of her computer screen as if she were part of the furniture. She answered phone calls with a calm, polite voice, typed minutes and memos with impressive speed, and organized piles of documents like someone arranging her own soul, carefully, methodically, with a discipline that bordered on art. She also made coffee for the lawyers, strong black coffee, no sugar, served in white cups she washed herself afterward, even though it wasn't her duty. She knew each person's preference. The senior partner liked his with cinnamon. The young lawyer preferred plant-based milk. Ashley paid attention to these little details, even when no one noticed. She smiled politely in the hallways, nodded, slightly in greeting, and returned to her world of well-done tasks, comfortable silence, and days that followed one after the other, almost the same. She did everything with extreme competence, and her superiors knew they could rely on her, maybe even too much. But there was something no one saw. A quiet whisper deep inside Ashley's heart, a growing restlessness, the desire for something more. Sometimes, while typing long contracts or organizing folders with names that meant nothing to her, Ashley wondered if this was really the life she had dreamed of. She had a talent for writing, loved to observe people, and invented stories in her mind during coffee breaks. But she shelved these desires like letters never sent. She didn't dare dream too big, not yet. maybe out of fear, maybe out of habit. The safety of routine embraced her, but also confined her. She didn't allow herself to imagine a world where surprises were welcome, where the unpredictable meant joy instead of chaos. And so amidst that meticulously measured routine, Ashley began to notice something different, something that didn't quite fit into her silent, perfectly aligned schedule. It all started with small noises coming from the apartment next door, sounds almost shy yet constant, as if quietly asking permission to enter her carefully organized world. It was always at night, just after 10, when the city lights outside the 6th floor windows began to blink lazily. At first she thought it was coincidence, hurried footsteps crossing the narrow hallway, as if someone was pacing back and forth, searching for something. Then came muffled laughter, not full-on chuckles, but quiet smiles born from deep inside, escaping even when they shouldn't. Every now and then there was the sound of an out-of-tune guitar, timid chords that missed the rhythm and then fell silent, as if the musician was learning to play their own heart. Ashley, lying in bed with a book on her lap and a cup of tea on the nightstand, found herself paying more attention to the wall than to the pages before her eyes. It was as if the apartment next door had come alive, a life that stood in stark contrast to the methodical quiet of her own home. She had never heard noises before. Until then, that neighbor, if it was the same person, was as silent as Mbai. She was. They never crossed paths in the elevator or on the stairs. No exchanged greetings, no shared glances. It was as if they lived in parallel worlds, separated only by a thin wall and a handful of bricks. But now something had changed. The sounds seemed to carry emotion. Some nights held a certain melancholy, as if the silence next door was broken by deep sighs or the scraping of furniture, like someone was searching for comfort by rearranging their world. Other nights, the noises were light, almost joyful. Livelier music, a lonely whistle, a gentle tap keeping time with some rhythm. Ashley would lie down, pull the blanket up to her chin and just listen, not out of mere curiosity, at least not an empty kind, but out of a kind of silent empathy. It was as if she recognized in those neighborly sounds a reflection of what she herself was trying to hide, the wish to break free from the automatic, to feel alive, to connect with someone. And so a restlessness was born inside her, an almost childlike desire to know who lived on the other side of the wall. Who was this invisible presence that invaded without asking her carefully built silence? Who played the guitar with such hesitation, who laughed alone in the dark, and then, on a rainy Friday night, when the sky was lit up by flashes of lightning and thunder, seemed to trudge heavily through the city's wet streets, Ashley heard a different sound. It wasn't the usual patter of rain against the window, nor the hurried footsteps that sometimes echoed down the hallway. It was a loud bang, sharp, dry, unexpected, like a piece of furniture had fallen over, or something heavy had crashed violently onto the floor. She jumped out of bed, her heart pounding as if it too had fallen from somewhere. She stood frozen in the middle of the room, barefoot, holding her breath. The silence that followed was even more unsettling than the noise itself. No dragging of furniture, no call for help, no sign that everything was okay. The unease she had been feeling for weeks turned into real, almost tangible worry. Ashley paced the living room, arms crossed and restless. She stopped in front of the wall that separated her apartment from number 605 and stared at it, as if she could see through the plaster and layers of paint. But the wall stayed silent, opaque, indifferent. She thought about going out and knocking on the neighbor's door. She even grabbed her keys and placed her hand on the doorknob. But she hesitated. She didn't know his name. Didn't know how he'd react. Didn't even know if it was really him living there now. So she took a deep breath, went back to the kitchen, and grabbed the little notepad she used for grocery lists. She sat at the table, picked up her fine point blue pen and wrote in her neat, delicate, almost shy handwriting, "Hi, this is your neighbor from 604. I heard a loud noise tonight and got worried. Is everything okay over there? Please let me know if you need anything. Ashley." She read and reread the note 3 times, trying to find the right tone between care and politeness. She didn't want to seem intrusive, but she couldn't ignore what she'd heard. Folding the paper gently, as if it were a secret, she taped it at the top of the page, slipping on her fluffy bunny slippers, a little treat she'd bought herself one lonely Sunday morning. She quietly walked down the hallway, which was bathed in a lazy dimness. The ceiling light flickered intermittently, keeping time with the storm. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth drifting in through the slightly open windows in the hall. She stopped in front of door 605. The dark wood looked even more closed off at this late hour. Carefully, she placed the note in the center of the door, as if framing a picture. She took a deep breath, hesitated for a moment, then took 2 small steps back, as if waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Just silence. She returned to her apartment, her heart racing, feeling strangely exposed, as if she'd revealed more than she intended. Sitting again on her bed, sleep now felt like a distant visitor. She couldn't stop imagining what or who was behind that door. A real mystery, knocking on the door of her gray everyday life. But it wasn't fear keeping her awake. It was curiosity, the feeling that something new had shifted. A thread, thin, subtle, almost invisible, had just been cast between 2 neighboring worlds. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone in her own silence. That night, lying under the covers, listening to the rain tapping against the glass, Ashley felt something different inside her. It was as if life, the very same life that always followed the tracks, had taken a small turn. A soft, mysterious turn, and maybe, just maybe, a magical one. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving a trail of freshness in the air and tiny puddles shimmering under the shy sun that was just starting to peek through the clouds. Ashley woke up as usual at 6:30 a.m., but something in her routine felt slightly different. The alarm went off, the coffee brewed with its comforting aroma. The toast was just right, golden and crispy, but her heart was different, alert, waiting. Before even brushing her teeth, she walked over to the apartment door as if something was pulling her. She opened it carefully and peeked quietly down the hallway, and there it was, a small piece of paper neatly folded, pinned just beneath her own note, now crinkled at the edges from the night's humidity. Ashley bent down and took the new message with careful, almost ceremonial hands. She read it, written in a firm, masculine handwriting. "Hi, Ashley. Thanks for your concern. Everything's fine here. Just a fall with a heavy suitcase, moving day stuff. Nothing serious, just a scare. I'm glad to know I have such an attentive neighbor. Edward, 605. Ashley smiled. A true, spontaneous smile. One that hadn't touched her face in a long time, even before putting on lipstick. She ran her fingers over the signature, as if that name held some ancient secret. Edward. Now the mystery behind the next door had a name. On her way to work, she didn't think about deadlines or piled-up reports. She thought about the note, about the scare from the night before, and about how strange and sweet as it was to feel connected to someone she didn't even know, but who lived just a few steps away, just one wall between them, and now one note tying them together. In the days that followed, the exchange of messages quietly became a habit, a delicate ritual that happened with the back and forth of footsteps between 6:04 and 6:05. A new piece of paper, a new note. Sometimes just short, casual sentences, yet full of a newly born intimacy. Do you also wake up to the sound of pigeons at the window? Today I let the rice burn. How about you? Ever had a culinary disaster day? Good luck at work, neighbor. Other times the notes were heavier, as if the gentle weight of life fit between the lines. Edward shared thoughts about books that had marked him, snippets of songs he listened to as a child, memories of building forts with sheets in his grandmother's living room. Ashley responded with equal tenderness, talking about her postponed dreams, her passion for old movies, the fear of feeling invisible amid the noise of the world. Gradually, what began as concern turned into affection, a discreet bond hidden in the gap between the door and silence. Ashley started keeping each note carefully, almost reverently, in a blue velvet box, a gift from her grandmother, who wisely said, "The right words can change the destiny of a heart." And she was beginning to believe it. Even though she still hadn't seen Edward in person, never a wave, never a meeting in the elevator, he already took up a generous space in her thoughts. She didn't know what he looked like, what clothes he wore, if he had a beard or light eyes, but it hardly mattered. What touched her was the gentle tone of his words, the light humor, the quiet attention he offered even through paper. It was like talking to someone blindfolded, but with a heart alert, guided by intuition and hope. It was like walking on a bridge made of letters and trust. Ashley's life still followed its rhythm. Coffee at 6:30 a.m., office at 8, hurried lunch, back home at dusk. But now there was a sacred pause between opening the door and finding a new piece of paper, folded with care, with words that made her smile to herself. It was a Tuesday like any other. Ashley was coming home from work, her mind full of numbers, deadlines, and documents, balancing her keys and a grocery bag in her hands. The rain had started again, light, lazy, and the gray-tinged sky seemed to call for silence. The elevator was broken, so she climbed the stairs slowly, step by step, feeling the weight of an ordinary day. It was when she rounded the last corner, already on the 6th floor, that everything changed. The hallway curve was dark, one of the bulbs flickering, and the sound of a door opening echoed off the concrete. Ashley didn't have time to look. In an instant, she bumped into someone hard enough to drop the bag and her thoughts. "Ah!" she exclaimed, instinctively trying to catch the tomatoes rolling away. "I'm sorry, I didn't see you," said a low but intense male voice. They both bent down at the same time, their hands touching as they reached for the same package of coffee. Ashley slowly lifted her eyes, and there he was. Edward. She knew it was him even before hearing his name. There was something in his brown eyes, kind, curious, a little surprised, that perfectly matched every note she had kept. He was tall, wearing a wrinkled shirt with a sweatshirt over it, hair a little messy, as if he'd just woken from a deep sleep or a song. "You're," she began. "Ashley?" he finished, smiling like someone who had finally found something they'd been looking for a long time. The hallway seemed to disappear. The rain became background music, and for a moment, everything stopped. They stood there, laughing nervously, picking up the scattered items. He offered to help, picked up the keys from the floor and opened the door to 605. "Want to come in?" "Just for a minute I can make some coffee," he said, still holding the package that had been in her hands. Ashley hesitated, but her heart said yes before she could think too much. His apartment was cozy, filled with books, plants on the windowsills, and a guitar leaning against the sofa. The barely practiced sound she had heard at night now had a face and context. He made 2 cups of strong coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table like old friends finally reunited after a long time apart by chance. They talked about everything and nothing. About the notes, of course. They laughed at the coincidences, the faceless confessions, the fears shared in scraps of paper. Ashley noticed how Edward gestured while he spoke, and he noticed how her eyes lit up when she smiled. That night, neither of them heard the sounds of the rain, nor remembered the broken elevator. All that mattered was that moment, the now that carried all the before and the promise of what was to come. And that's how it began, no longer behind a door, but face to face, what the notes had already sketched out. The start of a love story. Born of kindness, curiosity, and care. A meeting that wasn't planned, but that fate gently made sure to arrange. That very night, as the coffee cooled on the table and the clock seemed to slow down, Edward looked into Ashley's eyes with a mix of shyness and courage. "Ashley, I would like to invite you to dinner tomorrow. Nothing formal, just a little. A dinner here at my place. I want to continue this conversation we started," he said with a shy but sincere smile. She felt her heart speed up, not in a strange way anymore, but in a new way full of promises. "I'd love to," she replied, feeling a pleasant warmth spread through her chest. The next day, after work, Ashley left the office with a mix of anxiety and joy that made even the walk feel lighter. She got ready carefully, choosing a simple yet elegant dress, and let her imagination fly toward that date that, even so brief, already meant so much. Edward was waiting with a surprise. A table set on the apartment balcony, soft candlelight flickering, a delicious aroma of homemade food in the air. He had put effort into the menu, choosing dishes that tasted like comfort and those intimate moments. They talked about old dreams and present desires, favorite books and songs that had marked their lives. Edward shared funny stories from his youth, and Ashley, between laughs, spoke of the stumbles and victories in her routine. Every glance, every gesture, every smile exchanged was a silent invitation to know each other more, to trust one another, to let love begin to take root. That dinner made time lose its usual rush. Hours passed like seconds, and when the last candle went out, neither wanted the night to end. The following weeks were a sweet whirlwind of dates, exchanged messages, carefully left notes, and many shared moments. Ashley's routine, once predictable steps and silence, now had laughter, surprises, and the gentle touch of Edward's hand. He took her on bike rides, made improvised breakfasts, and never failed to surprise her with small gestures that spoke louder than words. She, in turn, felt alive, blossoming into a love that didn't need grand declarations to be intense. It was in the simplicity of everyday life, in mutual care, in the quiet companionship where they found their happiness. And so, between meetings and discoveries, smiles and touches, their love grew. Silent but strong, discreet but immense. Until, one day, Edward looked at Ashley and with a sparkle in his eyes whispered, "I want us to build a life together." She smiled, needing no words, because in that look was already the answer her heart had been seeking. Ashley's routine at work was exactly the same as before. The same strict schedule, the same office with white walls and windows facing the neighboring building, the constant sound of keyboards clicking, phones ringing, and quiet voices discussing legal cases. She arrived promptly at 8 a.m., greeted her co-workers with a polite smile, and sat at her desk neatly organized with papers lined up and colorful pens always within reach. She answered calls with her usual courtesy, managed schedules, prepared reports, and distributed documents to the lawyers. Everything followed the usual flow almost mechanically, but inside something had changed deeply. Ashley's heart beat differently, faster, more alive. There was a new lightness in her step, a subtle sparkle in her eyes, a smile that slipped out unexpectedly, even in the most tiring moments. Every time she received a message from Edward, or recalled their last conversation, a wave of warmth and hope washed over her. It was as if that once predictable routine had taken on a different color, a sweeter flavor. She found herself daydreaming about the little details of their relationship, the way he fixed his hair, his easy laugh, the care he took to prepare that surprise dinner. Even during long, exhausting days at the office, her heart was full of new things, plans, desires, and above all, that delightful certainty that something true and beautiful was being born there, between notes, conversations, and meetings. As the clock ticked the hours away, Ashley knew that behind the daily routine, her heart was traveling unexpected paths, discovering a love that transformed her, helped her grow, and lit her up from within. And that made all the difference. Over time, the love that blossomed between exchanged notes and casual encounters grew deep roots in Ashley and Edward's hearts. Their simple, shy relationship gave way to a solid bond, nurtured by genuine smiles, shared confidences, and small, daily gestures that made each day special. After several years of building dreams together, they decided to take a step that would change their lives forever. Marriage. The ceremony was delicate and intimate, filled with what truly matters, genuine love, presence, and the promise of a shared life. Under the golden evening sky, Ashley and Edward sealed their union, celebrating not only the happiness they had found, but the destiny that brought them together. Shortly after the wedding, they moved into a larger apartment, where every corner held memories, plans, and the certainty of a future built as two. There, amid laughter and conversations accompanied by the city sounds outside, they created their home, a refuge of affection and peace. Their love was simple, made of little things: a carefully prepared coffee, a sweet message in the middle of the day, the touch of hands on a late afternoon walk. The love that lived next door showed that true happiness doesn't need grand gestures, but a sincere desire to be together. And so Ashley and Edward went on, living and loving, discovering that sometimes the most beautiful love is closer than we think, living next door, gently knocking on the heart, waiting only for us to open the door and welcome it in. Because after all, love lives next door, where you least expect it, but where it's always worth staying.